The afternoon buzz of everyday life filled the suburban grocery store as Mayor Michael Harris strolled in, dressed casually in a button-up shirt and jeans. His cart was already half filled with groceries. Small errands like these serving as a way to stay grounded. A brief break from the pressures of leading a bustling city. Near the self-checkout stations, a man in a red MAGA hat gestured wildly, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice pierced through the store's hum like nails on a chalkboard. "I'm telling you," he said loudly, oblivious to who might overhear. "This country's gone to hell. You can't walk 3 steps without seeing some idiot running the show who shouldn't be there." The man, Brandon Hayes, glanced over his shoulder and briefly locked eyes with Michael. With a sneer, Brandon turned back to his groceries and added, "Even this guy probably thinks he's in charge of everything now." Michael froze for a moment, his hand hovering over a loaf of bread he was about to scan. The comment, so casually dismissive and racially charged, caught him off guard. Straightening up, Michael's voice cut through the murmur of the store. "Excuse me," he said evenly, his tone carrying just enough authority to quiet the nearby air. "That's not something you should say in front of me, or anyone else for that matter." Brandon turned to face him, a smirk playing on his lips. "Relax, buddy," he said. "It's just a joke. You people are always so sensitive." Michael's jaw tightened, but he maintained his calm. "And people like you always think they can say things like that as long as they slap the word joke on it." Nearby shoppers began pausing, their eyes darting between the two men as the tension in the air grew palpable. "Why don't you just mind your own business?" Brandon snapped, his bravado faltering slightly as Michael stood his ground. Michael smiled faintly. "When your business involves spreading ignorance and hate, it becomes everyone's business." Brandon glared, his face reddening, his phone now forgotten in his hand. He barked, Well, aren't you the hero today?" The self-checkout area had transformed into a stage for a confrontation that escalated with every word. Brandon leaned on the station and laughed bitterly. "You know, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking but too scared to say. This whole country's been catering to people who think they're entitled to everything. Bet you love playing that card." "Huh." Michael inhaled deeply, his voice measured as he replied, "You've got some nerve assuming you know anything about me. Let me give you some advice. Think carefully about what you say next." Brandon's smirk widened, his MAGA hat bobbing slightly as he shifted his weight. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did I offend your delicate feelings? You people sure do love being the victim." Uneasy glances were exchanged among the crowd. A woman discreetly tilted her phone, capturing the exchange. As Alana, a young store associate, edged closer, her hand hovered over the store phone, her eyes darting nervously between the two men. Michael's voice remained calm but firm. "Victim? No, Brandon. People like me are survivors. We've been surviving people like you for generations." Brandon's grin faltered, the smugness cracking. He glanced around, finally noticing the growing crowd. "Oh, you've got an audience now. Huh. Must feel real proud stirring up drama in a grocery store." "You're the only one stirring anything," Michael countered, gesturing toward Brandon's unscanned groceries. "Maybe focus on getting that checkout to work instead of embarrassing yourself." A small chuckle rippled through the crowd, and Brandon's face turned crimson. "Don't get cocky," he growled. "You don't know who you're talking to." Michael's lips curved into a faint smile. "Funny, I was just about to say the same thing." Brandon's gaze narrowed as he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I run Hayes Construction, big company in town, probably building the roads you drive on. Pal, don't act like you're someone special." Michael tilted his head slightly. "Oh, Hayes Construction. You've got a bid with the city, don't you?" Brandon blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Yeah, so what? That's none of your business." "I'd say it's very much my business," Michael said smoothly. Before Brandon could respond, Alana stepped forward, her voice deliberate and firm. "Sir, if you're not going to check out, I'll need you to step aside for other customers." Brandon turned on her, his expression twisted with irritation. "Why don't you stay out of it, sweetheart? Just do your job and let me handle this." Michael's fists clenched at his sides, but his voice was sharp and composed. Don't talk to her like that. Yeah? What are you going to do about it? Brandon snapped, leaning forward slightly, his breath reeking of hostility. Michael held his ground, his voice calm but authoritative. You'd be surprised. Brandon chuckled darkly, shaking his head. Oh, I get it now. You're one of those guys who thinks he's better than everyone else. Big talk, no action. Michael stepped forward, closing the gap between them. His voice dropped to a low, steady tone. Nobody. Huh. People like me don't need to act better than you. The truth does all the work for us. Brandon's fists balled up at his sides, and his voice rose again, drawing more attention from the crowd. You think you've got it hard? Try being a white man in this country these days. No one gives a damn about us anymore. Murmurs spread through the onlookers, and Alana's hand hovered over the phone, her fingers trembling. Sir, she said, her voice a little firmer now. This isn't the place for that. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Brandon turned to her, shouting, Call them. I've done nothing wrong. This guy's the one causing a scene, acting like he owns the place. Michael let out a dry laugh, folding his arms across his chest. Irony, coming from the guy yelling at a store clerk and holding up the line. Brandon's face turned almost purple with rage. He stepped even closer, practically nose to nose with Michael. You think you're so smart, don't you? Walking around like you're untouchable. Well, let me tell you something. You're not. Guys like me built this country. We'll take it back, too. Michael raised an eyebrow, his voice cool and unshaken. Take it back? Brandon, it's people like you who are the reason it needs taking back in the first place. The crowd gasped, a few stifled laughs breaking through the tension. Brandon, his pride visibly wounded, looked ready to explode. Instead, he took a step back, his hands twitching as though itching for a fight. The presence of witnesses held him at bay, at least for now. Alana placed her hand on the store phone, speaking softly to Michael. Do you want me to call someone? It looks like he's about to lose it. Michael shook his head slightly, keeping his eyes locked on Brandon. Not yet. He'll either back down or dig himself into a deeper hole. Brandon muttered under his breath, glaring at Michael. You don't scare me. Michael's reply was calm and measured. I don't need to scare you. The truth will do that on its own. The atmosphere thickened, the tension simmering just below a boiling point. The punch hadn't come yet, but the threat of it loomed heavy in the air.